Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank. Heystek's back. He's back to join me on my journey of the stars, the sky, the moon, the mission, and William Shatner is apparently a space traveler himself.
Hey Rob, and hey everyone watching and listening.
How do you feel about William Shatner going into space? We got to talk about that.
Oh, I love it because I'm a big Trekkie,
Okay.
and William Shatner, Captain Kirk, actually going into space. That is actually really awesome.
Do you like it though that it's so easy for people just to go up there now, like a person who's an actor or someone who might just have enough money to go up into space? Because I've heard interviews with like Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, and they're the type of people that talked about like it should only be reserved for people who've trained, especially their whole life for that mission. It's like a rite of passage in a way.
I like the idea that it's accessible to anyone. So now, if you can afford it, you can go up to space, and with more companies joining in, SpaceX, Blue Origin, Rocket Lab, Orion, it's going to become much cheaper for the average person to actually go into space. And that is something I'm looking forward to. And also, one thing I haven't actually heard much about it in the news lately, but Elon Musk with his next, so he has the Falcon 9, Falcon Heavy, and then the next iteration will be Starship. So he had a competition where he and a Chinese billionaire, where the billionaire wants to take up 10 artists with him on the first flight of Starship. And the idea is that the Starship goes to the moon, so orbit the moon, fly around the moon, come back to Earth. And to secure a seat, you have to submit your artist. So what will you make after this journey to the moon and back? And if you have a great idea, then you get a seat on Starship.
That's interesting because my astrophysicist friend, Dr. Serene Nemi, she's doing a space training camp like what the astronauts go through.
Mhm.
It's like becoming a show or something that she's on. Um, and it's just interesting because I think with the amount of information that NASA, Bill Nelson coming out and saying that we don't know about these, he needs a glass of water. That man's speaking. I'm like, good God. But it's interesting. I want to know if the spike of astronauts joining or people wanting to join the astronaut program has really increased. Like it seems like a giant push to get a recruitment thing in a way. Because
Yes,
like
that has.
okay, there has been.
It has been. So NASA is planning to going back to the moon. So actually a manned mission to the moon again. And I see they have pushed back the date. It was supposed to be 2023, but have now pushed it back to 2025. Back in the Apollo days, so the missions were called Apollo. So I see the new missions are called the Artemis Project. And for to have actually set another person on the moon again. And then from there on, they want to establish a sort of permanent presence on the moon, so research base. And that forms part of the Artemis project. And now there has been I want to say, a career drive towards astronauts. I see NASA starting to recruit some people, and SpaceX as well as Blue Origin. So it's going to be like we are in the 60s again. So there's going to be a big boom with space exploration and a lot of attention focused towards space things and space travel, space exploration.
With all this acknowledgement of all this stuff going on, have you decided to do like more of your own private research into this topic? Because I mean, you've been on a couple of times now. Like I think recently we've been getting more. I've been getting really interested in the UFO stuff. So, that's I think that's on a lot of people's minds as well too. Mostly because when I get across or come across a lot of people in this community, they all have different ideas, like future people, future tech, past tech, all these types of ideas that just like I'm like, what is going on? Let me sit down and grab my drink. Um, and I let you. I have the ability now to you can screen share if you come across anything, or if you have anything that you've been getting interested in and looked up, or anything that you might think that might be good to talk about, or maybe something I might not be keen on knowing, because I love learning about this type of stuff.
Mhm.
Because I mean, forever I thought like the moon like would have been a viable option to go and live on. We talked about Civilization 2 or another stage, but
Mhm.
then it was like Mars might be an option. But now they're talking about Venus, that they I guess, thought before that Venus's atmosphere you would just burn up or something would happen where you just couldn't survive, but maybe it just might be the atmosphere. And if you break through the atmosphere, you might find more stable conditions deeper down below. And I'm like, that's Bill Nelson from NASA, who I've never seen. Like they just dusted him off of like the Halloween costume section and threw him up on stage, like talk about UFOs. And he's like, okay, I'll go insane.
So I've been following that. And one of the scenes from Star Wars you're probably familiar with is Bespin Cloud City. That's up in the clouds and a Millennium Falcon flying to Cloud City. So there's an idea. We know the surface of Venus is inhospitable, and we know Venus is basically one big greenhouse. So there is a idea that why don't we construct something in the future like Cloud City on Venus and we live in the clouds?
I don't know about that, but I mean, I guess that might be a new generation that would have to be used to all they know is living in the clouds. But I think we're going to get to a point where I was seeing articles about the amount of fresh water on Earth might eventually burn out before we think that it will. Like we think it might last a couple hundred generations, but it actually might be before. And I'm like, I don't know because that climate change talk just it's a lot of BS in so many aspects of things because I think people ramp it up to make you act now rather than be honest about the flow of it. And I'm like, well, we can desalt the water. We got to figure that out. Like I understand the space journey is important, but at the same time, you don't need to worry about another planet when you could figure out how to just desalt the water. Like that's seems like it would be step one, but there's just this high priority of are there other beings out there? I mean, I thought Bob Lazar was a rational and reasonable source to talk to or talk about. Not anymore. There are a lot of people in that UFO community that hate Bob Lazar. And I'm like, why is there so much divisiveness when it comes to these aspects? Everyone's got their own idea of what this is, but it's all hypothesis. It's all skeptical. It's all ideas, but people want to act like they're 100% true to their belief. And I'm like, this is where we start to see the hindrance of progress.
Yeah, I totally agree. So as soon if so let me put it rather this way. If everything needs to be supported by facts, so all fair and well, each their own can have their own opinion, but if you don't have facts to support everything, then you can't be 100% sure. So unless we have proof that aliens has visited us or proof that we are communicating with a different civilization, then everything is still speculation. And we can go and look at the statistics. Statistically, it's probable that there is alien life, but we still have to prove it. There's a big difference between actually getting proof and just having a theory about something.
I always try and go on the Black Vault or some other website that has something that they
Mhm.
just randomly throw up there that I've never heard of because it's always a blind side type thing that pops up. Um,
But as you were speaking about of desalting the water, there's actually technology that already exists. So here in South Africa, we went through a big drought the last 4 to 5 years. And especially in the Cape Town region, most of our dams collecting water were dry and there was insufficient rainfall. So they constructed a desaltation plant next to the coast that takes in seawater. You take the salt out, you filter it, clean it, and go through a few processes, and then in the end you have drinking water.
Yeah, I know. It's weird though. They never did that with California when they were going through droughts. What they did was they literally got to the point where they were asking people to use dowsing rods to be able to find where the water is
Mhm,
by using water witches and all these types of things. I'm like, you think
mhm,
that we would have a better standard of trying to be able to, that should be like the first research study. But, it's so hard because it's not like if I pitched you, like, hey, we're going to learn how to desalt water. Now, from a scientist perspective, that seems interesting and very useful. But
mhm,
from a regular public standing, that's like saying, hey, I'm going to offer you some juji fruits. It's a little candy that's really gummy like, and it really gets stuck in your teeth for like days.
mhm.
Not entertaining for them. But then I go, I'm going to give you this chocolate cake, and the chocolate cake is UFOs. And then everyone's like, oh my God, I love it. That's what it gets to. But like, here's the thing right here. I'm going to share screen with you with this real
Okay.
quick. Defense Airborne Reconnaissance Office, DARO, Unmanned Aerial Vehicles UAV Program Plan 1990, April 1994. The Congressional Authorization Conference in November 1993 sent a message that was clearly received by the Department of Defense, the DoD. The report said that in this new post-Cold War era, tactical reconnaissance is relatively more important to national security than any other time in our history. At the same time, a new approach was requested that would bring management attention, order, and efficiency to tactical airborne reconnaissance development and acquisition. On November 6, 1993, in response to congressional concerns, the Deputy Secretary of Defense created the Defense Airborne Reconnaissance Office under the Secretary of Defense Acquisition and Technology. So the DARO has been charged with unifying existing reconnaissance architectures and enhancing the management and acquisition of all joint service and defense-wide manned and unmanned airborne reconnaissance surveillance capabilities. Now, there has always been so it's the task of benchmarking fundamental responsibilities and resources that will create the climate necessary for change by concentrating its energies in the following areas: assessment and trade-off of system level capabilities, analysis of system requirements to ensure inter I don't know that one. Development of new and improved sensor technologies and pursuit of advanced concept technology demonstration, development of unifying airborne reconnaissance architecture consistent with other reconnaissance related roadmaps. What do you think, man, about everything that happens to do with everything that they've talked about? Why are they just doing it now? Why is there a giant push? And there seems like, oh, we got all this information we got to give everybody. I'm like, how long were you holding on to this? Were you waiting for someone to care? Or are you looking at the fact that maybe our space program or funding might have been shifting into people like Elon Musk, Bezos? They seem to now dominate the eyes of the public when it comes to space travel. NASA used to be the only corporation that was doing those types of things in the States. Then you have your billionaires going up into outer space, William Shatner going into outer space. Maybe it's a thing of like, hey, NASA's doing cool shit too, guys. Hey, come over back over here. Is that what it is? Because it's starting to really look like that, because they've been holding on to this for a very long time. And the fact that they're choosing to tell us now, I don't think it's because they're afraid that these things are going to start attacking us, or these things are going to start being irrefutable. I think it's because now they're started to notice that people like the billionaires are giving people the information. NASA has, I think, over a million something followers on their Twitter. Elon
Mhm.
Musk has 26. Bezos has like 7. Like, NASA's cheaper than they are. And I think it might just be a popularity attention thing. Like, hey, eyes back on me, guys. We're the real space innovators.
It could be, but if you look at it from a practical point of view, NASA was the organization, well, the organization is probably still the organization for space science, engineering, technology. But if you look at funding, year after year after year, NASA's budget is being cut by Congress and Senate. And that's a problem. So right now, the last statistics I've seen, I think NASA's budget is 0.5% of the US GDP. But if you look at private organizations such as SpaceX, Elon Musk, Blue Origin of Jeff Bezos, they have a lot of funding available. And if something goes wrong, they don't have much of explaining to do. For example, back in the day, a space shuttle mission cost in a ballpark figure of around $3 billion for a space shuttle figure. So I think it's $3 billion, or it's one, I'd say between $1 and $3 billion a space shuttle mission. So if something goes wrong, such as the Challenger disaster, the space shuttle blew up, you lost 7 astronauts, then you have to go in front of the Senate, explain to them what happened, and please can I have more money to do it again. Where with private corporations now, such as SpaceX, if something blows up, you don't need to explain to anything. You just take your money and you do it again and redo it and redo it and redo it, where NASA is now being governed by bureaucracy and a lot of red tape they need to get through to actually do something. But what people also don't realize is for every dollar going into NASA, it generates $7 in return via technology being developed. And that technology now, well, the technology is being developed, it's being used for space purposes. But in a couple of years, usually our normal citizens can use that technology. For example, cell phones. Cell phones were originally developed to came from communication systems for spacecraft, and now everybody uses cell phones. GPS satellites was originally developed to be used for tracking spacecraft, tracking debris, tracking everything going on in orbit, but now everybody uses Google Maps, Apple Maps. And so eventually we are going to use that technology.
Now you think of it. This is what I like about how your brain works, because you're thinking of it more of the money aspect of it. I'm considering it more on the ego aspect. Like I would think that
Mhm.
the space force, and I'm kind of relating more human characteristics to a giant corporation, which is an aspect of like I want people to think about me when it comes to space, not think
Mhm.
about Elon Musk or anything like this. But there's a hole that you kind of poked in it, and there's also an inflation part to it as well too.
Mm.
If you see Elon Musk going into outer space, wouldn't it be better to be funded by the government in some aspects, let Elon take the credit but also take the fall if it does end badly, where people can just shame him online and make him a hateful person of the world, much like they did with Bill Gates? Or they can team up and they can use a lot of Elon's equipment and work with our space program to go up there as well too. Great way to get funding by having a billionaire fund you as well too. So what, you got to throw them on the rocket when it goes up. But I think it's it's weird to see how the power has shifted, where I start questioning these billionaires of why there's such a giant push for them to go into space when they have as much money on here to be basically a god.
Mhm.
And the only aspect I could see about being on a new planet and discovering a new planet is being able to control its flow. And I think when you're here and you make so much money, Elon Musk and Bezos, they don't really have to worry about struggling or working or anything like that. They have enough to survive and control the flow. Basically, they can it just be like being on a different planet for us.
That's actually very true. So NASA is now teaming up with SpaceX. I know Jeff Bezos and Blue Origin went to court about it because NASA handed out contracts to SpaceX to do astronaut launches to the National Space Station and supply launches, resupply missions. And Jeff was not having it. He said it was unfair. Why wasn't his company used for it? So he went to court, lost the case. SpaceX got a contract. But yes, there's going to be a public-private partnership between these organizations now. And yes, ego always comes in. And I don't know if you saw the tweet that Elon sent to Jeff when he, what was it, a couple of weeks ago when Elon became the richest person again and Jeff went down to number two. He sent him a tweet of a silver medal with a number two on it.
I do love Elon so much for just the way he speaks and the way he talks and tweets. He likes to start shit, and I like that so much. But I look at this more as like a friendly competition between two people. But
Yes.
it's very strange because I always question more on the aspect of the government, mostly because Elon was the only person that didn't agree with Biden's infrastructure bill to try and push this new tax on electric cars. And
Mhm.
that was the reason why he wasn't invited to the White House at that meeting that they had about it. Bezos was, all these other corporations that were invited there that are promoting electric car use. They're going to, because I mean, it's strange because it's all because Elon's company doesn't have unions, and unions are a bad thing. It's when people are upset with their conditions and they form a union to strike, much like Kellogg's Corporation did recently. And that means Elon's workers are so happy that maybe not so happy, but they're so invested in their company, they don't need to strike. They're getting paid. They all have stock in the company, so they're making a good amount of money. But Bezos' conditions aren't like that. But Biden only reached out and extended an offer of help because he realized that they were probably weak. I don't think that's a just Biden issue. I think that's a government tactic to try and work with these corporations and support them when they're at their low so they know about. It's kind of like at my work, for instance. you'll see a trainer that'll train like someone who's overweight, and then they'll invest time into them. You be nice to them when they're in their bad, and then when they're in their prime, you get them because they remembered how nice you were to them before they were in their
Mhm.
peak or their
Yeah.
prime. It's a sleazy tactic, but it's out there. But I think I'm so hesitant in what it is. I think a lot of this UFO stuff might be electrical stuff or might be some type of weather phenomenon. I just don't know if it's future tech. I think this is an idea that the government has technology, no doubt has propulsion systems. There's no doubt in
Mhm.
my mind they haven't already figured that out yet. But people think that it's otherworldly. And I'm like, I just think it's tech that we've never seen before. And I think there's a reason why we've never seen it. And the reason why we might be seeing it now is because it might just be a show of guns to, other countries or something like that. I mean, that's all that it's been throughout history, has been a show of how powerful we are by the armies that we have.
Yeah, I totally agree. And for example, if you take in the US, Area 51, that is usually where these experimental planes and technologies are being tested. Take, for example, World War II going through the 60s, 70s. You have your stealth bombers being developed there and being flown. You have now drones. You have your U-2 spy plane from the Cold War. So all in well, you can develop that technology, but somehow you need to test it. So Area 51 is a great place. You can test it. It's a remote site, not many people in the area. But now we are living in such a place. Everybody has a camera in their pocket with the phone. You can record something. Um, People have access to security cameras. You have now telescopes you can set up. You have your own CCTV cameras you can set up. So now when I think governments are testing their new technologies, it's harder to hide these technologies as well. So someone will see it and thinks, oh, I saw a UFO, but in fact, there might be a new drone being tested.
I just picture like these corporations having like 50 years advanced tech, and they're like, hold on, before you go on to the next 10-year tech, you got to release some of this older stuff. You got to get some of this out of the warehouse so that people realize we're not just going from 0 to 100. And he's like, well, what do you think we should release? So I just picture one dude with like a piece of paper and a timeline plot of like, all right, we're going to release this in November, we're going to release this one in January. It's like movie trailers, like you see that. That's what they're doing. They have it
Mhm.
all timed and planned. I want to show you this real quick that I just found.
Okay.
So it's every UFO case sent to UAP task force considered entirely classified and exempt from
Mhm.
disclosure. Now, what I get excited about in this is what I've been trying to say for the longest time is that the government doesn't have to show you jack shit. And everyone likes to think that if they stir up enough of a ruckus, that people are going to be like, "Oh my God, we're going to get it all released." No, the government chooses when they want to show you. They don't care if you stomp your feet in the sand. It says in a striking blow to those seeking answers from the U.S. government about UFOs, a recent response to the Freedom of Information Act (FOIA) case filed by the Black Vault has revealed that each and every UFO case submitted to the UAP task force is exempt from disclosure and entirely classified. As a result, the entire FOIA case originally filed with the DoD in May of 2020, seeking the release of all of them, was denied in full. So, months prior to the official announcement of a UAP task force in August of 2020, the DoD had said in a statement to writer Roger Glassel, a contributor to Swedish magazine UFO, they had a multiple agency task force looking at UAP sites. Now, I don't. I get that people think that the Freedom of Information Act is like it's like a warrant basically, like, oh, this gives us the right to do this. No, it doesn't. They're not going to be open about this. And now here's where I start to get skeptical again, is if they're saying this, that they're denying it, they're saying it's exempt. What are they hiding? What do you have to hide? Which now brings me back to the point: is it future tech, or is it so like the time travel thing has really got my mind boggling because I see videos of a Mike Tyson fight, and in the background there's a person with an iPhone, and I'm like, how the hell did that get there? Now, was that added in? I don't know, because technology's gotten to a point you can morph photos like that.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
this seems very clear. It doesn't seem tampered with, because there's always a little bit of offness to how it's been placed in there when it's
Mhm.
been tampered with, where I start to go, but then if it is time travel, why wouldn't he go to the Evander Holyfield fight where they bit his ear, where he bit someone's ear off? You go back to just a random flight back then, so maybe it was a fan, I don't know. But I start to question is like, I like the idea that it's aliens, but I also don't because I'm thinking rational and I haven't seen any true evidence to say that it is. But I see some of these UAP videos, I see some of these Tic Tac things, I see some of this stuff. It looks weird, man. It looks like something that obviously landed here. And I think maybe we modified it. Maybe it's like the movie Zoom with Tim Allen, where he has that
Mhm.
saucer in the warehouse and he just modified it. It crashed here in the 70s. And then maybe it's that. I don't know, but what do you think?
It could be, well,
Be
talking about us
100%
now.
honest. Hit me with it.
So one thing that actually popped into my mind now when I was thinking about this, I don't know if you're familiar with the TV show Fringe.
Mhm.
So where the FBI have a fringe science unit that investigates teleportation,
Yeah.
time travel, and they have that scientist Walter that is completely bonkers but genius. So I'm not a big conspiracy theorist. So I usually live by the facts. If the facts and the data tell me something is that way, it's that way. If it isn't that way, it's not that way. So I'm more of a black and white type of person. So either it exists or it doesn't exist. But who's to say governments aren't hiding something from us? That is also a possibility. Who's to say corporations is not hiding something from us?
What do you think if you had to choose or speculate about what's one thing that they're probably hiding from us? What do you think it is?
Ooh, that is a really, really good question. So if I think they're hiding something, it will probably be some sort of weapon. That will be my best guess. So, for example, things talking about weapons. So, if you go powerful, then a nuclear weapon, go to hydrogen weapon. And back in the 90s, the use of hydrogen weapons was banned internationally, uh, not because they are that powerful, but you can actually set the atmosphere of the entire planet alight with a hydrogen bomb, and then all life will be wiped out. And just after that, the Russians tested their hydrogen bomb, and it was chaos, but no one knows if all those hydrogen weapons have been dismantled and where they are. And while the US said they don't have any hydrogen weapons, but they develop hydrogen weapons. So used to say they don't have hydrogen weapons somewhere in their arsenal.
I definitely think there's plasma tech. There's some type of
Mhm.
tech that's energy weapon or some type of thing that's being able to like kind of like the movie Transformers where they had
Oh,
those
yes.
yeah, where they had those like on Transformers they had the subs with the giant like Gatling laser guns
Yeah,
that could
yeah.
just fire off one giant blast. I think that's true, but I think we used to talk about colonization on other planets. I think it's
Mhm.
impossible only because we've already weaponized space. If you watch like
Mhm.
Space Force where they clip another satellite's
Oh,
wings,
yes.
we have stuff like that going on at different levels and more extremes in some sense where I look at it like the idea that it's might be still a space race going on. It's always that because everyone's looking to be ahead of another person's country. And I think that there's this aspect of when you land on another planet, it's just going to go away. Oh, we'll save that drama for Earth. No, there's just this idea that you always kind of have to be fearful in a lot of these aspects because how hard is it to tell if a thing was blown up or if it just blew up on natural occurrence of something going wrong, a mechanism misfiring? When I heard Elon Musk talk about one of his rockets in the beginning that launched up and it didn't land, it just crashed and exploded. A lot of people were making fun of it, like, and then a lot of people were in support of it. But when the way he's talking about, oh, it was one of the cushions or the rings, we didn't account for the heat accountability to it, and it overfired, and it crashed, it just broke. That's how he said it. And I'm listening to him talk. I'm like, how easy is it to just have a laser or something that we can't see with our eyes that just attacks it and explodes it? And then you see someone die or someone lose their life and it gets chalked up to a manufacturing issue. Where next thing you know, that person's delayed in research or progress to go to the next planet or go to some type of space endeavor. Our progress is being hindered by ourselves and also the capability of how our minds are bigger than our eyes. You see what I'm saying here?
That is very true. I'm actually looking for an image I can show to you now. But the US Navy actually has a laser that they're testing that are used to, or tested to shoot down drones with. That is actually very, very cool. So let me just grab these images. So there's one image. This one. So where's
And
the
then you
other
just hit
image?
share screen at the bottom and you can share screen.
Okay, cool. So this is the other one.
Just hide all the porn first. Just push it all into a folder.
Share screen. So let me just open up. Where did I save this now? So see my Zoom has updated and the controls is a little bit different than I'm used to.
This is what I love talking to you and Dr. Serene Nemi, because you guys have a more like logical basis on a lot of these things, and then I can have my buddy Campbell and a couple other people come in with the more skeptical ideas of things too. But I like to dip my toes into both ends of the pool because I like to try and understand, because I'm more in belief that people will do whatever they possibly can to make sure that they stay ahead of other people, or at least try and find a way to get their name
Yes.
in the history books. What is that?
So can you see the screen I'm sharing?
Yeah, it's like a telescope with a green laser to it.
So yes, that is a giant laser we have at the observatory where I am. We actually have 3 of them. So what it is we have a giant laser on the right hand side, green laser. And this in the middle here is our reflector. So we use this to do tracking and telemetry on spacecraft and satellites. So satellites usually makes use of GPS to track their location, but you need to make sure those satellites are where they are and you need to track the GPS satellites as well. So we have 3 of these lasers. So we call them SLR, satellite laser rangers, and we have the LLR, lunar laser rangers. So let me just swap the images and show you this one as well.
And these are what do they say that they're used for?
So that's what I'm going to show you. Am I sharing the correct screen now?
Math is logical, math is practical, math is magical.
Okay, then I'm sharing my desktop and
It's a good background.
thank you. So now I'm sharing my desktop and not a screen I'm actually looking for. So yes, that you should see now the laser.
Didn't they make it illegal a long time ago to have those green lasers that you could like point at the moon and shit? Remember that when people are going
Yes,
blind?
so you actually need a license now for these lasers. So what we do with these lasers are, so you literally shoot a satellite with it, and then the laser reflects back. And in the previous image, I showed that telescope part, looking part, and that detects the photons coming back. So when you shoot a satellite with this laser, the laser reflects back. You record the time for the laser to reflect back. You know what the speed of the laser is. Then you can calculate the orbit of the satellite accurately to 3 millimeters. So if there's a new satellite launch, say with SpaceX, we do priority tracking missions to make sure the satellites are in the correct orbits. Otherwise, it can hit something, or you can lose it, or it can enter Earth's atmosphere and burn up, and we don't want anything like that. So those normal red laser pointers you can show against a board in class, and we all played around with. You can make you can change the head, and you can make all sorts of patterns. That's usually around about 3 milliwatts of power. Then you get that green lasers you can shine up into the sky and play around with. That's in about of 100 milliwatts. So thinking about it, to pop a normal balloon, you need about 200 milliwatts. So this laser we have right here is 1.3 gigawatts of power. So that's the order of a million stronger than normal handheld lasers. So we have 3 of them. So one of the things is we have safety systems around the observatory, such as a radar and cameras within the sky. So if an aircraft approaches the observatory and is 10 kilometers from the observatory, the lasers shuts off. Otherwise, you can blind the pilots and cause some damage probably to the aircraft itself.
Could I stick my
But
hand in front of that laser? Would it do anything?
yes, it will do probably a lot of damage.
Okay. See, this is when I start getting curious about things, is that maybe they pitch this as a design of, hey, we'll stop an asteroid from maybe it might impact Earth, because for how long have we just been missed by an asteroid? Maybe that's how they pitch it. But you know they're not going to use it for that. You know they're going to accidentally be like, I fired off the laser and it hit one of our enemy's aircrafts on accident, or it shot down one of these UFOs. When I start seeing those lasers start pointing at those types of things and they release
Mhm.
videos like that, that's when I'll know it's not government tech, because the government wouldn't shoot down their own thing on purpose. But hey, I don't know. I wouldn't put that above them either.
That is actually very true. So we have 3 of these lasers. So the third one we have is a bit more powerful. We use it to do the same stuff, but on the moon. So the Apollo missions left behind giant reflectors on the moon. We know the location. So with these reflectors, we then calculate the orbit of the moon each year and see how the moon approaches the Earth a little bit each year, so it can come closer to Earth, but further away from Earth. So we can track basically what the moon is doing around Earth. But one of these lasers was developed by NASA that we have. The other laser we have was developed by the Russian space agency Roscosmos. And the third one we developed ourselves. Something interesting, the one we received from Roscosmos and the other one we received from NASA, in the contract we have of buying this equipment, one of the clauses is you shall not use this laser to shoot wildlife with.
Wildlife. Does UAP count as wildlife?
So that is something I found actually funny, but the other thing is, if there's a warning not to use this on wildlife, then this can cause serious damage. And now the US Navy has done or released a few videos where they use lasers where they shoot down UAVs.
Yeah, see, I start to wonder, like, what happens if just maybe that thing accidentally is miscalculated and it's maybe getting a small glimmer of it's bouncing off somewhere? Start a forest fire.
Yes,
How do we know? See, the thing is that what I don't like about the way that the governments or this type of work gets done is that no one is really kind of taking accountability for things. It's more about pushing blame or doubling down on something and bringing up some weird environmental factor that, oh, it was just the dryness of this or a cigarette that was loose. I start getting to this point where if we are truly afraid that there might be some type of thing from another world here, and instead of making an announcement about it, I want to see them lose their shit. So the point that they talk about is, well, they don't want to scare people. They were more than happy letting people know that this pandemic was going to kill the third person you or every third person you've ever met in your entire life. You're telling me that they don't care? They don't care about the fear narrative. They don't care about how scared you get. They're not losing their crap because they it seems like it might be a little bit of a lie. But like I said, this is speculation. I don't know. I'm not against it if it is alien tech, but I don't see them doing a lot of things when it comes to, if I was going to say, if you had to choose, if the government pitched a plan to ask for more funding, how much of that money of, let's say, $1 billion or $1 trillion, how much of that money do you think is really going to go to the surveillance idea that they're talking about? Or how much do you think is going to go to just military action or a way to weaponize something?
that is actually a very good point. So in the news lately, a good example is someone from the World Health Organization tweeted if Elon Musk gave something like 2% of his net worth, they can solve world hunger, and it calculated to about $6 billion. Then Elon Musk actually replied to that tweet and said, okay, show me the calculation how you got to $6 billion. And if you will use open accountancy, so showing exactly where the money is going, exactly in whose hands the money is, exactly what is being done with the money, then he will sell Tesla stock immediately and donate $6 billion. And then I came back to him and said, oh, unfortunately, we cannot do open accountancy, which makes you think,
I,
what will they actually use the money for?
it's not going to be good in my opinion. I mean, the DARPA robot they showed, that four-legged robot that could like walk around, everyone's like, "This is awesome," but no
Mhm.
one saw the side photos of when it had weapons hooked onto it. Like that's
Oh,
always
yeah.
what it gets to. That's the only way people are going to be more than willing to put up their money or use of whatever these tax dollars are. Is not the people's idea that it's going to help out the society. It's the idea that if our adversaries or whoever these people, like when I see Bill Nelson say, "We don't know if it's our adversaries," when he says that, I go, why do you look into the camera when you say that? It's like if me and you know that someone out there that we're both friends with is listening, and then we just go, we say something that me and you get, and we know they're
Mhm.
gonna get, but the rest of the
Mhm.
world is gonna gloss over it. That's the way he said that. It was that I'm reading it just on the basis of the way that he's talking doesn't make a lot of sense if you're truly concerned. He's more of like, it's amazing. And I'm like, here's a thought. Here's a thought. It's a conspiracy, kind of, in my own head. Imagine if you have a bunch of people invested into a program to study UAPs and UFO technology, thinking that
Mhm.
you know that there is this out there, and these people are going to be leading the charge, and all they know is that there is alien life. Because why would I be at a job where they say that there is, and the whole point of this job is to study this? Then you need a public announcement for one of these people. They're going to be 100% like, it's aliens, it's alien technology, it's alien this, either to save their job to make sure that their funding stays there, or they really believe this and that is now a part of their reality, much like a flat earther believes that the earth is flat because that's their reality. You can't change their opinion, but it's good acting. It's like if I was going to do a scene where I need someone to cry. I let them know, hey, this horrible thing just happened. And then they actually start crying and you just roll with it. And then afterwards, you tell them it's all BS because you needed that live reaction. Nobody's that good of an actor. I don't think he's an actor. I think maybe he necessarily doesn't have all the full information. I think they inflated or they changed a narrative and installed it into his head. They told him, hey, there's UFOs out there. We're going to hire you to watch these things. Oh my God, if the government says there's UFOs, I'm going to keep researching it. Then you just keep feeding him information, hoping that one day he sees something in the sky that might look like a UFO that he can talk about whenever this type of stuff happens.
Yeah, that is very true. And all comes down to misinformation. So actually now on Saturday evening, um, there was a new launch of Starlink satellites from SpaceX. And when those satellites were pushed into orbit, it actually flew over South Africa. So it's actually quite cool seeing these Starlink satellites. It makes a nice little trace across the sky. I don't know if you have you seen it before.
A rocket launch?
The rocket launch just when these Starlink satellites goes overhead. So let me actually show you a image of what it will look like.
Isn't it so
Uh,
much better to share screen than trying to describe things that we've
yes.
seen?
So let me show you these images. It's actually very, very cool. Let me just open it up.
Because I know, did you see the recent statement by Avi Loeb?
No.
I'll have to show you that one. He was talking about he got lit up by the UFO community because he was like, this is not like aliens or anything like this.
That will be cool. So let me just, where is the last image I want to show? So that's the one image. So let me share this. This one. Yeah. So you see this is just a streak across the sky. So some people think it's a UFO, it's something weird going on. But in fact, if you look closer to it, let me get the following image. is this one. Then it is this one. So the following image will be this one. Let me just move it around. So if you look closer to it, then you will actually see your individual satellites moving over. And Elon Musk plans to put roughly 6,000 of these in orbit. And it will be used to provide internet coverage across the globe that is not interrupted whatsoever. So Saturday night in South Africa, a lot of people saw this streak of light going across the sky, and the first thing everybody thought was, oh, it's UFOs, it's UFOs. If you look at all the Facebook groups, Instagram posts, everybody was going crazy. There's UFOs above South Africa, especially the Johannesburg region. But in fact, it's just a new launch of satellites of SpaceX.
Why? I mean, I don't understand why people would think it would be aliens. Like, why would they line up in a formation like that? But I guess maybe that's what they saw in a movie somewhere. They thought that might be a general consensus of, I don't know. I'm gonna share a screen real quick so you see what I see.
Okay.
Okay. So this is Avi Loeb in a recent conference interview.
That I would like to introduce, if you allow me. First of all, we are almost developing life in our laboratories. We are able almost to produce synthetic life in some laboratories on Earth. And so God in many religions was the creator of life, was the creator of the universe. If we, in the future, understand how to unify quantum mechanics and gravity, we might even be able to create a baby universe in the laboratory. So my point is simple. An advanced scientific civilization could be an approximation to what we called God. And the second point is, religions argue that humans were created in the image of God. Well, I would argue that we are now developing artificial intelligence systems that are in our image. So in the image of an advanced technological civilization, you will have AI astronauts. I don't think we should send people to space. We were selected by Darwinian evolution to survive on the surface of this rock. And in space, there are many hazardous conditions. We should be proud of our technological kids, these AI systems that drive cars right now, and in the future, they could be astronauts. So instead of sending millions of people to space and endangering their health, we should send our kids, technological kids, AI systems into space. Now, if we can imagine doing that, someone else might have done it, because most of the stars formed billions of years before the sun. So my point is simple. Let's look at the sky and check if there is any equipment, AI astronauts, that were sent by other civilizations. And that's the goal of the Galileo project.
I just want to say they're in an open floor plan where it echoes a lot, and there's not a single person in that damn crowd. Could they have picked a smaller fucking building to do it in? But I do want to say, when they talk about synthetic life, now there's a movie on Netflix right now called Replicas with Keanu Reeves, which talks about implanting consciousness from a human who's passed away and use the rest of their brain and copy and blueprint it onto a robot to be able to have it live through a robot, kind of like RoboCop, but without the human aspect to it. It's just 100% artificial. Now, he makes me think a little bit. I agree with him and I disagree. I disagree on the aspect of, I don't think it should be strictly for AIs. I think it should be people go up there and experience it as well too. I understand the Darwinian evolution theory that he brings out there, but I also think that maybe the robots, that I do agree with them, the robots should go first and discover a way to be able to get to the planet and hone the proper technology to do the trip without losing any life and make it as minimal as possible. Because even with the technology we have now, taking a space trip, William Shatner could have easily had a heart attack while he went up into space. He was not trained like an astronaut. And even coming down, every interview he's ever done since, he has been like in an emotional state because he's seen the beauty of what is beyond the blue, what is beyond this earth or rock that is on. He's been up in the atmosphere, and it's broken him. It's something it's much like seeing like Santa Claus isn't real. Oh my God, you can't freaking unsee it. That's what's happened to him. And I'm like, he's not mentally stable enough to understand or be able to reset himself back. So you've kind of ruined somebody in a sense. Now, I think there needs to be more testing done, and I think it would be safer if we had AI tech go up there as well too. But that idea that he talked about, synthetic material that is already created, and this man is a very renowned scientist. I start going, well, he's obviously not a conspiracy person. So this is a very it really shaked the UFO community, I'd say, on Twitter. There were a lot of people that were really discrediting him and saying this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I guess on an aspect of they might disagree with some of his things, but I think there's a large push for wanting people to be up into outer space, and I necessarily don't think that the risk has been entirely eliminated yet. You know what I'm talking about?
I completely hear what it's talking about, and there's some points I agree with you. So one thing interesting, so what he said, you can create artificial life. So that's something that we have the technology already to do. So we can create clones of ourselves. So first clone ever made was the sheep Dolly. So we can clone sheep, we can clone animals. So even now well, if you have a lot of money, you can even clone your beloved
Dog.
pets. So
Yeah.
your dog or cat. So if your dog or cat are at the end of its life and it's still in struggle, then you
$10,000.
can, yes. So you can do it, and it's the exact replica of your pet. So the only thing currently now stopping us from making clones of humans is basically ethics. So what we do in a ethical point. So there's a lot of laws and there's a lot of activists saying, well, we cannot create a clone of a person. And I've read up about it is some people say there might have been in secret be already a clone of a human being created, but due to the ethical reasons and backgrounds, it's been kept quiet from the general public. And also think about it, the Nobel Prize for Medicine from last year. It was last year or this year, it went to technology being developed called CRISPR. CRISPR is used to manipulate genes. So with CRISPR, you can actually, there's also a can of worms that was opened with CRISPR, because now people can design a baby. So
I want my baby to have blue eyes, and I want him to be really good at basketball and a star athlete. Well, we got to add in a defect, because you can't just have a number one alpha kid. You got to have something. So if we're going to make him good at basketball, he's going to be dyslexic. You're like, what? It's like, you got to take a positive and a negative. The idea that they call it CRISPR is like, that sounds like a fried chicken place with babies. Like, what the hell is that?
I know it's an acronym for something. I'm not completely sure what the acronym stands for, but the technology exists for us now to create different life. For example, now couples that struggle to get pregnant, there's now technology, it's not been approved again for ethical reasons, but instead of, for example, a baby growing in a womb, you can now actually grow a baby in a lab. They've already done that with a sheep as well. So you have an artificial womb and you can literally grow your baby. So the technology is there. The question is, have it already been used and it's just been kept quiet due to ethical reasons? That I don't know, but I agree with space exploration. It makes sense to send a robot first to make sure you figure everything out, to make sure human life is not wasted or destroyed or killed. And with William Shatner, that is true. I know the astronaut, Colonel Chris Hartfield, he said, when you go up to space and you come back, you see the world completely differently, as it has opened up your mind and eyes to something else. And looking at Will Shatner, it seems like that has become evident that it's true. He's seen something he can't describe to the rest of the world.
I think I brought up this idea before. I was like, if they can just model a clone or take kind of like an artificial, I guess, information of you, a copy of you, could be online. I have close to 1,000 episodes to so to think that if I end up dying, and they want to make a clone, they could just scan all the content on here and upload that algorithm into a artificial intelligence and then have that like that. The only, I guess, warm, cozy feeling I have about that is that the person I display on the show is the exact person I am in real life to the point where my mother would recognize who I am. And I feel like for a lot of people with their social media posts, it's not going to create the person who they originally are. And I think that's where people start going, like, people are like, the idea of cloning, I get, especially if like you die, imagine having a second chance, even though it might not necessarily be the same you, it's just a different you. But it kind of brings to the point of like when you find out that Star Trek, every time they jumped in that teleporter, they reassembled your particles. So you're technically a clone of the person you used to
Uh,
be. If you have that thought in your head, knowing that you're a clone your whole life, it's a different feeling, man, than knowing that you're the original. It's kind of like you're a copy of a thing that you used to be. Then here comes this theory that I brought up a long time ago. How long until you go, "Oh, wait, so I'm going to use the teleporter? Yeah, just sign this. Okay, I sign that. And then I use the teleporter. Next thing you know, I'm just a copy. I'm not the original Robbie. The original Robbie's dead. They go, "Oh, hey, welcome over here. You're in France now. You want to go get some lunch?" It's like, sure. It's like, we're going to go to Applebee's. It's like, I don't want to go to that restaurant. I want to go to a France restaurant or something in French. You go, it doesn't matter. You're a clone. You don't have rights. You're like, what? I don't have rights? No, you don't have rights. You're not a human. You're a clone of a human. You don't have clones don't have rights yet. And you're like, so I have to do whatever you say. Yeah. Or I just kill you because there's no murder charges for killing a clone.
that is a very good point, and that is actually a very interesting topic. And I've seen a few debates on this before, especially when looking at clones. I don't know if you remember, it's on Netflix now. It's a movie in the mid 2000s with Ian McGregor and I think Scarlett Johansson, The Island,
Haven't
where
seen
they
it.
realize they are clones and all the clones is living in the island and they're specifically kept for spare parts for their owners that created them. So if you need a liver transplant, you just go to your clone. If you need a kidney transplant, you just go to your clone. And then they started to break out of this island where they're kept, and then they start realizing clones don't have any rights and they're just seen as spare parts.
Yeah. It's kind of like the movie with Paul Rudd where he cloned himself. That just came out like 2 years ago or something. He got a clone of himself to do like some of the stuff he doesn't want to do so he can go explore the world. And the clone started living in his house, sleeping with his wife. And his wife started to love the clone, not him, because it was a better version of him because his clone didn't have any problems or stress. The clone was happy with the life that it had because that's all it knew. And this guy was like, still had that ambition that humans have. So it's like, it's just interesting to see where I'm like, oh my God, like, I, I don't know. I hope a fucking clone comes to my door one day trying to fight me. I would kill it so quick. I would kill it. I don't care. I could easily kill me. Um, I think there's just a weird idea of there's a fear of technology from it becoming artificial intelligence to where it's like Terminators. But then what about these algorithms that just slowly brainwash people in such a way that make them just fight amongst each other and kill themselves and win in that way? We're not worried about like we're more about enhancing our own bodies with technology by putting implants like cyborg stuff inside of us. But these algorithms, man, they set people on paths that necessarily might either make you happy or keep you happy, or they desensitize you and make you angry, such as a video of puppies. If I watch one video of puppies, it suggests another video of puppies, it suggests another video of puppies. Eventually, puppies aren't going to make me happy anymore. Puppies, I'm going to be decentralized. I'm going to be kind of desensitized on anything that comes to do with anything cute and fluffy. But then if they show me something evil, which was their main argument with Facebook with the whistleblower, the fake one, is that it might just been the Jan 6 Capitol Hill thing might have been a factor of algorithms. When you start watching riots, they show you more riots and they keep showing you more riots, which spikes up this interest that, well, riots happen all the time. I might as well start this riot. And that's what ends up getting to this point where maybe these algorithms are destroying our own minds in a sense. Maybe CRISPR isn't as good as they say it is. How much of the technology do they throw out at you saying it's going to do this? And people do the complete opposite with it. Technology, phones used to be a way to communicate with people that weren't near you, people that you can communicate from overseas or other countries. Then they started putting bills onto it, and then people started downloading apps to their phone. And the next thing you know, you're playing Dragon City at 2 o'clock in the morning, or you're watching some stupid anime at 2 o'clock in the morning. That's what happens. Technology does not, or anything does not go the way you intend it to be created, because there's always a way to find a way, a loophole, something to turn it into something that it's not.
That's exactly true. So technology will always have a good side and a bad side to it. A great example is the internet as we see it today. So the internet had a totally different function in mind as was used today. When it started out, was used first called the DARPANet. So the internet was first constructed by the US military and different US universities for a backup communication medium for in case there's an attack on the US. And um, during those times, telephone lines were taken down, so you have no way of calling each other, and the different radio masts are taken down, so you don't have two-way radio communication. So they wanted a backup form of communication, and they called it the DARPANet. And then they started realizing, well, on this DARPA communication net, we can add, Sir Berners-Lee started it. So with the HTTP protocol, we can actually load web pages on it, as we now know today. And you can actually see data. And then from there on, we have different web pages. And then, okay, web pages is cool. Now we can start doing blogging, and then we can start selling products. Then you can start sending messages. And now where we are with the internet today is totally different than it was envisioned back in the 1980s. Just as a backup communication channel, now we can use it for basically anything that we want.
Why do you think they haven't made an announcement about clones, like a real government announcement?
I think due to ethical reasons. So if you think about clones, you can open up a whole can of worms on that. So the first thing is you will have pro-life activists saying you can't clone a person. If you clone them, then the clone needs to have rights as well. Then other groups can argue clones can be used just as spare parts or be used as workers in dangerous situations, such as, example, mines. And then on the other hand, you can have your religious groups saying, well, now you are playing God. So you are not allowed to play God. You're not allowed to create life of your own. So I think there's still a lot of questions to be asked for, and then what is the legal aspects around it. So my point of view is, as a scientist, I think it's great. Let's do cloning. I don't see a problem with it. But I'm a scientist, and I see it from a science point of view. Someone from a legal point of view might see it totally differently of what rules will there be with cloning? Will there be a constitution? What laws do they need to follow? Will they actually have rights? So it actually becomes quite more difficult. So if you clone an animal, so for example, you clone your favorite pet, it's just a pet, so no harm done. But as soon as you have something like a human where it has feelings, it can think for itself, then it becomes a more difficult situation.
Yeah, but if Avi Loeb goes out and makes this announcement, now a lot of people might be known to the fact that, wait, we have clones. Do you think that why would he, like, why wouldn't the government just crush him or take him out, or why would do you think people would, the way he said it sounded so normal, where it's like, if you this came out a long time ago, maybe they could just ride that wave. Like, you should already know that we're doing this. You know what I mean? And people will be like, it's too late to act now. We've been doing this for years.
I think you're right. So think about it. So we have technology to clone your favorite pet. So who's to say someone or a private lab somewhere hasn't created a clone of a person yet? So if it actually surfaces, then you can just say, well, we've been doing this for years now.
Yeah, the idea that people think that we just stopped cloning at the sheep, there are some people that believe that. And I'm like, no, nobody ever just does something successfully and then stops doing it. I guarantee you there's plenty of people trying to find ways to reanimate people from the dead too, not just create a clone.
Yeah, that as well. For example, I think the last time we spoke about it, there was cryogenic freezing. So when you are almost at the end of your life or you have a deadly disease, you freeze yourself until someone has developed the technology to save your life.
Walt Disney style.
Yes, exactly.
Good old Walt Disney. It always leads, but do you think Disney's running the world secretly?
I don't know, but it looks like they have a finger in a lot of pies these
Yeah, that's what
days.
I'm thinking. They have like some stuff where it's like, why are they investing in Pfizer? Like, that's really, really weird.
Are they investing in Pfizer?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
A lot of news corporations are doing that as well, too. But I just look at it like this. Here's my little theory is that so the ride's called Temple of Doom. How
Mhm.
long until that ride just crashes and then everyone goes to sue? Like, you killed my cousin on that ride. And he just goes, it's called Temple of Doom. You should have knew what you were getting into. You know what I'm thinking? Because I started looking like they made a Fauci documentary. They made it so you can't comment on the documentary. You can only rate it. And then they have a bunch of stuff on there. Like Disney, for instance, my buddy has this conspiracy theory. His name's Brandon. He had this idea that has become like really, really popular with a lot of people. I've been seeing it actually on like TikToks and stuff. People have been talking about as well, too. Um, the movie 1984 by
Yes.
George Orwell is now Wonder Woman 1984. And then you look up the movie Endgame. There used to be a
Mhm.
documentary by Alex Jones called Endgame. Now it's Avengers Endgame by Disney. And then you look at like what is it? Tangled, the movie Tangled. That came out before COVID. Do you know what land that the movie Tangled that they're in? Corona. The land of Corona is what they called it.
Oh, wow.
So there's just a lot of stuff where it's like it might be a coincidence, but how many things in reality are actually a coincidence? You know what I mean? Like it's very strange when you start looking at like the movie Frozen. When you type in Disney Frozen, you used to get Walt Disney's head. Not anymore, man. You get the movie Frozen with Olaf, and Olaf on the front cover is taking his head off. So they don't think that Disney is like creating all these giant incidences, but they think that they're trying to find a way, and they found a method of being able to cover up things like conspiracies or ideas by just making a blockbuster film and pushing it forward. I know plenty of 1984 was not a good movie by Wonder Woman. It was not a good movie at all. A lot of people hate it, but it's still a top result when you search it up.
Mhm.
Maybe it's a paid partnership with Google. I don't know. But when you type in DuckDuckGo and you type in 1984, you get George Orwell. DuckDuckGo is a free search platform. It's not like Google. It doesn't have any sponsorships and anything or any paid partnerships. So you start to look at this concept of like, is there a hidden hand with that? You got to think if you're the government and you're trying to get a bunch of things across, whether you're siding with a billionaire or you side with a giant corporation, it's much easier if you could just say, I'll make you tax exempt.
That is a really good point, especially when you can promise tax exemption to someone or a certain company.
Well, Disneyland in California in like the first, I think, what was it, month or a week or so that they were closed during the pandemic when everything was shut down, they lost like $7.3 million.
Oh, wow.
They make like a million something a day in just one of their parks. Now, if they have like 50 parks and all over the world, you have to think that they took, I think, over like, I'm gonna look up their total. Actually, I'll just do it on my phone. I'll look it up on my phone, but I'll just type in how much Disney lost in profits over the lockdown. They lost like a large, yeah, coronavirus hurt theme parks costing Disney $2.6 billion
Oh,
in
wow. That's a
just their
lot.
first fiscal quarter. Their first quarter.
Oh, wow.
Jesus, dude. The Walt Disney Company has reported that the company lost 6.9 billion in total of 2020 with
Oh,
closures all around the world.
that's a lot of money.
You got to think when the park first opened, you know who was going to the theme parks were influencers. And a lot of these influencers, you don't think that they put them aside, said, I want you to act like you're having a great time at Disney World is safe. And we'll give you free Disney tickets for life. Now, I've talked to Disney people on my show before, and they talk about, yeah, you get certain perks. They'll talk to you. Hey, if you hype up, even if you don't enjoy the ride, if you hype it up really well, you do good. We'll make sure you get free tickets. Everyone loves fucking Disney. I haven't been in a long time, so I have no attachment to it. I will talk as much shit as possible. But when they open up the parks and all these kids are riding these rides, some of them thought, you know what? Everybody's saying how much they love Disney World and it's reopened and it's amazing. Come back to our park. What happens if I just act sick? And there were a couple influencers that were acting like the rides were fun, but I feel kind of sick from the amusement park because they like the unemployment fear narrative. You know what I mean? So you start to see like, and those people probably were banned from Disney World. I don't know. But I start looking at it like, do I consider them above doing that? No. I don't think any corporation is above trying to find a way to lie or manipulate just to be able to get their business access easier. Now, the only episode I've ever posted that has ever been taken down for the things that I've said was that Disney conspiracy episode. Just that one. The rest of the time, everything that was the only time that was inserted in that episode because it was new to me. But every other episode, I was saying the same things. And then they flagged that as misinformation. Come on now. I never said that they were these giant corporate elites. I said there's an idea out there. That's all I said, man. That's what I'm starting to say is, and they ended up re-putting it back up. But I start to look at like, I think Disney has more hands in things than we think. I think Disney has hands in a lot of corporations, might even be mixed in, like much like Coca-Cola has hands in the Supreme Court, has hands in farming. There was I think a farm in Wisconsin or something, Monsanto's. They were spraying a chemical on the crops, saying it's better than water. So it was turning into the movie Idiocracy. It's insane, dude.
Oh wow! So there's actually a lot of stuff going around, and as soon as people start asking the correct questions, then things starts to happen.
Well, it's kind of like the Freedom of Information Act. You'll get a bunch of wrong results until you get every single date and every single time and every single event that was in that time period that you're asking for. When you get 100% of it right, saying, I know this is out there, give it to me. They're like, well, we can't just lie about it now. Just give it to them. So they'll shut up. That's kind of like what this is. It's kind of like you hit every single thing you found out, and they can either double down or they can be open about it. And most of the time, these corporations double down.
That is very true. And unfortunately, a lot of stuff is now being controlled by corporations.
Yeah, the idea that you can be an entrepreneur, you can start your own business. It's a disguised thing as you can be your own business person. But once you enter the industry, you realize, no, it's a corporated dominated market.
That is very true.
It's a dirty world. It's a dirty world. Dude, you've given me enough of your time, brother, man. I really appreciate you for doing my podcast again, wrapping up on the coming close to the end of 1,000. Where can people find you? Your links?
So you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. So just search my name, surname as one word, Heystek Grobler. So HEYSTEK GROBLER.
And I'll link it all in the description. Is there anything you want to say to anybody out there listening before we wrap up the show?
Just for anyone else, just for people in the Northern Hemisphere, 18th, 19th of November, you will be, depending where you are in the Northern Hemisphere, you'll be seeing a full lunar eclipse or a partial lunar eclipse.
Yeah, it's going to be an exciting time. I'm going to end up missing it. I know it's going to happen. Everyone's like, just look up. I'm like, I can't. I'm driving. I don't want anybody to die.